Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Terraria. Last time I made excellent progress, getting from the Brain of Cthulhu all the way to Skeletron. This time, I'm going to get to Hardmode and hopefully beat all three mechanical bosses. So, without further ado, let us begin. I started out in the underworld, where I immediately began the boss fight. The wall flesh was a little tricky, but I figured out if I stood close to him and went at him with my Knight's Edge, that seemed to work best. And pretty soon, I defeated him. Immediately after that, I made my way to the Crimson and broke the Crimson altars. I got Palladium, Orichalcum, and Adamantite. Then, I got some Lunker potions, made my way underground, where I started collecting the ores, inside Palladium, Orichalcum, and finally, Adamantite. I collected as much of it as I could, and then went home and made a forge and crafted the rest into bars. I didn't craft anything immediately because I wanted to make frost armor, and seeing as I had no frost cores, I had no choice but to put it away for later. Then I built a rope tower up into the sky to spawn wyverns so I could get souls of flight to make a new set of wings. They were a little more difficult to defeat than I expected, but using the flail I eventually collected enough souls of flight, and then I made my way to the underground Hallowed to collect the souls of light I would need. Eventually I settled on making a small carved out area, which made fighting the enemies a little bit easier. Once I had enough of those, I returned home and crafted the set of wings. After that I wasn't quite sure what to do, so I decided to add a few more rooms onto my house. While I was doing that, a snowstorm happened, so I quickly ran to the snow biome and waited for an ice golem to spawn. As I was standing there, out of nowhere, Deerclops spawned. And at first I was totally surprised because I thought he only spawned on special maps, but apparently he is in normal games. Regardless of what I thought, he was here, and so I had no choice but to fight him. I'd never fought this boss before, and he wasn't particularly easy, especially since I was totally caught off guard and had no arena or potions. To add to the trouble, lots of enemies spawned and even an ice golem. With all these enemies against me and no arena to help, I eventually got overwhelmed. After I respawned, I returned and Deerclops was still there, and this time I managed to defeat him. With that unexpected boss fight out of the way, I made a small hut so I could hide from the ice golems when they finally spawned, which didn't take too long. My hut worked well, and pretty soon I had my first frost core. Pretty quickly after that, I got a second one. Unfortunately, the blizzard ended before a third ice golem spawned, so I made my way to the outer edges of the map and started looking for goblin scouts. I was planning to try to get the Shadow Flame knife, as that seemed to be the best weapon I could get at the moment. After I'd collected up enough tattered cloth, I went back, made the battle standard, slept through the night, and started the Goblin Invasion. The enemy I needed to defeat was the Goblin Summoner, and they turned out to be really hard to fight. I didn't have any weapons with decent range, and when I got close to them, I ended up taking a lot of damage. The first one I killed dropped nothing, and the second, and the third, and then the invasion ended. So I went back to the outside of the map, collected some more tattered cloths, and started a second invasion. This time the first summoner did drop a Shadow Flame Hexdoll, but that wasn't what I wanted. The second one dropped nothing, and the third one another Shadow Flame Hexdoll. After another disappointing invasion, I slept through the night, but in the morning there was a snowstorm, so I quickly ran back to the snow biome, and just as the snowstorm cleared, an ice golem spawned. So I ran back to my trusty hut and began taking him out. I returned home and crafted the final piece of frost armor, and then began the third invasion. With my new set of armor, fighting the summoners was much easier, as I dealt much more damage and took a lot less as well. The first two were another disappointment, but finally, the third one dropped what I wanted. Since night was falling and I had a mechanical eye, I collected a few potions and began the twins fight. I was definitely glad I'd gotten a new set of wings and the Shadow Flame knife before I tried this fight, because I wouldn't have been able to do it without them. Even so, it was still a little tricky, but after a few close calls, I eventually managed to defeat them. I used the bars I made to get an Excalibur, and then went to the Underground Crimson to get a few things to spawn the Destroyer. The Destroyer fight was a little difficult because I had no piercing weapons, but the Shadow Flame Knife did enough damage, and seeing as he was a big target and really hard to miss, I slowly whittled away at him without too much trouble. My NPCs didn't fare too well, but eventually I did defeat him. After that, I made my way back to the Underground Hallowed and collected up a few Souls of Light, which I used to make a light disc, which I was hoping would help me to defeat Skeleton Prime. Once I had those ready, I collected the last few items I would need to make the summoning item and started to fight Skeletron. This was probably one of the hardest boss fights I'd done this whole series, as the light discs, while they did good damage, didn't have incredible range, so I had to get close to him to do any damage. This was of course difficult because of his 4 arms, but after I'd gotten those out of the way, the fight became considerably more easy. Then, with just a few more minutes left in the night, I finally defeated the final mechanical boss. That's all I have for this episode, so if you guys enjoyed, please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you in the next episode.